I love the conflict continuum because it's one of those tools that gives us exactly what we need in an hour of despair or hopelessness. Conflict is tough. There are the minority of folk who love conflict and they love to stir the pot, but let's call that maybe 15%. The other 85% of us do not, and in varying ways do everything that we can to work around it, ignore it, deny it, etc. We'll get into that. This is a great tool to spread all that out on a continuum and to visualize the differences that we ourselves go through when we cope with conflict as contrasted to those that might be very different than ourselves. So when you think about conflict, at least in sort of the traditional way, right? Two ends of the extreme would be negotiation and litigation, right? And then in the middle matter, we see people going through sort of, the tradition of conflict resolution or mediation or arbitration, which are lesser extremes of negotiation or litigation, right? So I think it's helpful to look a little bit deeper than that because most of us are not involved in anything quite so formal when we go through conflict ourselves. So the first thing to place up here is an anchor, if you will, that shows an extreme at the left and the right as defined by helplessness or powerlessness, which is to say, the more helpless I feel, the more powerless I feel in a conflict, generally the more extreme my behavior. That's true for almost everyone. When you think about what I'm going to call above the line conflict, which is kind of in this red heat zone, there's 4 dimensions to look at, and you'll see these spoken at, about, or around in the great book Crucial Conversations, and now probably it's 10th edition. But anyway, some additional layers here that we'll look at. But what we see happening in a lot of conflict is that it gets worse when an individual feels themselves or their self at more and more risk relationally or in the workplace. The more risk I feel, the more heated the conflict might become, right? Because I have more to lose. Also, as conflict starts to grow or mushroom, the challenges that we have with others become more rivalrous. It's almost a zero-sum mentality, like it's either you or me, buddy. Only one of us is getting out of this room alive. Another thing that we start to see really shroom up is emotionality. So people just start to become so extreme, so dramatic. And then lastly is they start to feel more exposed. So you can start to see how this stew in the red area up here is really problematic. Some people's extreme is to go to the right-hand side, which I'll describe as, to become violators or violent people behaviorally. And the slope begins with just general assertion. They start to try to seize more and more control where they otherwise feel, again, helpless or powerless. And when that doesn't work, they lash out a bit, which is where they're taking retaliatory emotive action. The greatest extreme on the far right-hand end is a righteous indignation. I mean, they're willing to die for this fight and can demonstrate a perversion of commitment or courage through, going postal or becoming jihadist, if you will, in the behavior, sort of a terroristic extremity in the workplace. Now, contrast that with someone that's moving to the left-hand side, right? They're not more and more, violative and violent so much as they are separating and silent. So they're getting quiet. But the first phase is just more assenting behavior, trying to maintain harmony, apologizing when they are in fact the victim and you're the batterer, but they're trying to maintain harmony. Second, beyond that would be, they actually leave, right? And it could be emotional death or relational death. They don't think about the workplace anymore. They don't think about their boss anymore. They don't worry about the colleagues anymore. Those folks are just dead to them in their mind. Or physical detachment, where they're actually getting to the far end, The opposite of indignation is resignation, right? I just don't care anymore. I'm leaving all my toys in the sandbox. You can have them. I'm out of here, right? And so we see sometimes a perversion of sacrifice or considerateness, often through resignation. So an individual turns in his or her resignation. They quit the job, believing that in some way that'll show you. And of course, what most people that we coach who have quit or, thrown their hands up in the air and stormed out, what they usually say is that, you can only fall on your sword once. So if you meant for it to be an object lesson to teach your employer, well, they very, very well may get the last laugh. But if you look below at the more, green sort of mirror images of the red, and we try to find a healthier, more sustainable approach, the opposite of feeling at risk is to feel instead opportunity in a relationship, and to say, wow, I was feeling at risk, but now I'm seeing that in this change, this conflict, if we can make it constructive rather than destructive, might lead to some new outcomes, might in fact prove opportunistic for both of us, because we're finally talking about the elephant in the room. We're finally talking about the thing that we've avoided talking about. I was at risk. Now I start to feel there's opportunity. The red was rivalrous, right? When we start to feel more gain or something constructive in a conflict, rather than feeling rivalrous, we might start to feel alignment. We were at odds. We were working against each other. In some cases, sabotaging each other, quietly killing each other somehow through rumor or innuendo. And now, rather than feeling like rivals, we're starting to feel like teammates again, and we're aligned. And where historically in the conflict we were incredibly emotional, indicating some sense of negativity, now, to the extent that we're emotional, it's mostly excitement. And then finally, whereas I was feeling exposed, I'm now starting to feel more and more secure. So the way that I get in a conflict from red to green is first to focus on me, and then proceed to what's my approach going to be one-on-one with other people. Am I going to move to some extreme end of the continuum where I'm, violent and indignant, or I'm silent and resigned? Or am I going to start to behave in a way that's more opportunistic and aligned and exciting and secure? Because to the extent that I do that first one-on-one, and then ultimately in my approach with others in a team setting, we can actually start to create something pretty special.